Hey everybody, I'm Ken Newhouse, and welcome to the world's biggest client acquisition show, the Get Clients Now podcast, where I interview the world's leading experts and extract from them the strategies, systems, tools, and tactics that are delivering real-world results for small business owners and entrepreneurs around the globe. Everybody, it's Ken Newhouse, and welcome to this episode of the Get Clients Now podcast. In just a few minutes, we're going to be having a very special guest on this episode. That's Debbie Ward from Silver Tablet Marketing. Debbie is a friend of mine, and she does a lot of really good work for small businesses. I know she's got a lot of raving fans and a lot of very happy clients. But before we get started with that portion of the show, I want to actually talk to you about creating the customer avatar for your business, and the benefits of actually having that. So to understand this, first things we have to begin with is that in order to market your products or services effectively, the first thing you're going to have to do is to get very, very clear on who your ideal client or customer or patient is. That's the framework from which we're going to start, right? The second thing is you're going to have to actually have a very clear picture of where they're hanging out. And by that, I mean, very simply, what type of media are you going to want to use in order to target them so that they're going to see their messages, see your marketing messages specifically, right? And the third thing is, what are their challenges? What are you going to help them with? What is your product or service going to solve for them, right? Now, I'm convinced, I've talked to enough of you guys at this point to know over the years, you realize that, investing the time to create a customer avatar, and obviously some people call this, you may have heard this as a buyer persona, right? But you realize that at some point that creating this for your business, this would lead to a huge impact in your marketing, but you're really not sure how that's going to actually happen. So in just a few minutes, I'll get into the how-to section of the nuts and bolts for creating a powerful customer avatar. But first, this is very, very important. I want you to understand that having a well-crafted, laser-focused customer avatar is literally the marketing secret weapon for small business owners, for entrepreneurs and professionals. A customer avatar, guys, is going to impact virtually every aspect of your marketing and sales process, which includes, for starters, your content marketing. So what blog posts, videos, podcasts, lead magnets, etc. should you be creating to attract and convert your ideal prospect, which when you have an avatar, and we'll explain that process. This tool allows you to know what to create, the content to use, right? In blog posts, videos, podcasts, etc., right? How about paid traffic? Which ad platforms should you buy traffic from? And what targeting options should you use, right? How about product creation? What solution or solutions, marketing? What solution or solutions, is your avatar searching for? Copywriting, right? That's my forte, right? Direct response copywriting, but how should you describe offers in your email marketing, in your ads, in your sales letter? How should you do that in a way that compels your avatar to buy from you, right? How about email marketing? Which avatar should receive a specific email marketing campaign? These are all valid questions, and really that's just scratching the surface. Listen, any part of the marketing and sales process that touches your customer, which is pretty much everything, right, is going to improve once you have created a laser-focused customer avatar for your business. Now, I want you to think about this for just a second. A certain type of person, right, buys our products or services. So it makes all kinds of sense, and it really does pay huge, huge benefits to you in the form of bigger bank deposits, right? It pays you to get clear on the characteristics of that person. Why? So you can find and present them with a marketing message and work. So during my call with Debbie today, I'm actually going to be covering part of the Get Clients Now blueprint, which really deals with profit trigger number 1 in the blueprint, and that is to narrow your focus and select one target market at a time, right? Profit trigger number 1, which is part of the attraction framework. Okay, everybody, my special guest on today's episode of the Get Clients Now podcast, as I mentioned, is Debbie Ward. Debbie is the founder and CEO of Silver Tablet Marketing. Silver Tablet Marketing is a boutique marketing agency here in St. Louis that helps small and mid-sized business owners, people who are struggling with knowing how to market their business. She does a great job with that because she helps them create a steady stream of customers through digital marketing. So Debbie, I want to welcome you to the show. How are you doing today?
I am great. How are you, Ken?
I'm doing fabulous. So
thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, Debbie, you're quite welcome. I've been to several of Debbie's training events, and I've also talked with several of her of her clients. And based on that, in my opinion, she's one of the top I know. So we'll actually talk more about that in just a bit, but the primary topic in today's episode is how to 10x your new clients by creating a laser-focused customer avatar. Now, I've covered Debbie's bio in my introduction, but before we get started, Debbie, I'd like you to answer this question for our listeners. Who's Debbie Ward and what's Silver Tablet Marketing all about?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I did not take a direct path to my marketing career, and I think that's probably more typical than not. But I actually went to college, and my major was French. I went to a small liberal arts college in Massachusetts, and I studied abroad my junior year. And I think that was probably one of the most challenging and enjoyable things that I did, but it was also one of the hardest things that I've ever done, because I really came to understand how different worldviews impact the way that we interact with each other. And even though I had taken a ton of French before I went over there, I really struggled with the language. So I had to learn how to communicate non-verbally. I had to learn how to communicate with very few words. And I really had to understand that not everybody had the same viewpoint as Americans did. And, quite frankly, I came from a very small, East Coast town, and it really opened my eyes to just all the various differences that people have and the various ways that people approach things. So I started working at an international company, and I did that for 7 or 8 years, I think, and then moved from Connecticut to St. Louis, and then was working from home and being a mom for a lot of years, and kind of stumbled in, was working from home and being a mom for a lot of years, and kind of stumbled into a position at St. Louis Community College. And what I realized was that all of the places that I worked, really where my work was focused was on communication. So I remember my first job, I was working with a very large group of people who were all over the country, and they kept asking me the same questions over and over and over again. And we had a very small staff. It was just me and then 2 people that worked with me. And so I quickly realized, look, we've got to come up with a way to communicate with these people so that we're not constantly on the phone. And that just seemed to be the repetitive nature of everything that I did. It just kind of always came back to communication and writing and how do you convey an idea? How do you put yourself in somebody else's shoes? And so I finally ended up at a local college. How can you use social media as a brand? And what a great platform it was, because it opened up so many ways for brands to tell their story. And so I just, became an avid learner, and, when I decided to leave there, I decided to found my own business and bring that knowledge and the experience that I had with a bigger organization to some of the smaller and mid-sized businesses that I knew could benefit from it, but just didn't have the bandwidth to be able to stay ahead of the curve and do it right.
That's a really compelling story, and I have to say I've worked with some of the top marketers in the world, and I've studied some of the greatest direct response copywriters of all time. Obviously now they're deceased. Eugene Schwartz, Gary Benzavinga, many people. And you share a very similar story in that I don't know of any of these people that actually went to school for a formal education in marketing. And so they've taken real world experience and been able to incorporate the lessons they've learned from that into their business. And so having said that, I think we should probably dive right in. The purpose of the episode is to actually teach people how to create a customer avatar. And there are several reasons why we do that, but in your estimation, why is it so important to have a customer avatar for your business?
Sure. I think that, first of all, I think it really, you have to understand, we as business owners have to understand that people may say that they're buying a thing or a service, but really we're buying not because we want a thing or a service, but because it's going to bring us some kind of an emotional benefit. So we're either going to feel something good or we're going to avoid feeling something bad. So, it could be greed. I'll be rewarded if I get this. It could be fear. I'll be in trouble if I don't buy this. It could be altruism. going to help other people. It could be envy, it could be pride, it could be shame. So when you are able to build a customer avatar, it allows you to understand on the surface what people want to buy, but really on a deeper level, what are they trying to accomplish with their purchase? And that's really what uncovers the triggers, and all the marketing messages, everything else that goes along, and even the offer itself, because you understand that deeper level and you can connect with somebody on a deeper level. So I think that's the very first reason. And then I think, that there are a couple of other really important reasons. One is that we have been conditioned, in this digital age to have answers delivered to us without very much effort on our part. We are conditioned to have intuitive experiences. So if you think about, for example, on Amazon, when we go to Amazon, it will put effort on our part. We are conditioned to have intuitive experiences. So if you think about, for example, on Amazon, when we go to Amazon, it will put in front of you, oh, you bought this, maybe you would like this.
Right.
We really become so conditioned to that when it's absent, we feel that absence. And if you don't truly understand who your customer is, you can't create that experience for them. So I think that's another really important thing to understand. And then along with that, we're conditioned for personalization. So if you think about, playlists and, Siri and automatic or AI developments now, and the recommendations that we get, and having favorites, avatars help us speak personally to the individual. So even though we may have, an avatar for a group of people, when we're actually communicating to that avatar, it takes it
Prospect.
in. I think we all crave to be seen. Right. Those are really the 4 basic reasons of why it's really important to have a good customer avatar.
Those are all excellent reasons, and I think also the reasons you just gave, in addition to the fact that having a very well-crafted, laser-focused avatar is going to actually give you, like you just said, a very clear picture on a very personal, intimate level of who it is that your ideal customer or patient or prospect, whoever it is, customer, client. But it's also going to actually give you some really clear ideas on where these people are hanging out. So as an example, why does it matter where they're hanging out? Well, you have to know what type of media to use in order to get your message through the clutter and get it in front of them, right?
Right, exactly. And I think it also helps us to uncover opportunities that we might not have thought of before.
That's great. That's good.
And even beyond that, I think it helps us go from, it brings our service or our product, it makes it
awesome.
Basically, you're going from a commodity to really something that has much deeper meaning for that person. And anytime that you can, take away a commodity, take away that element from your product or service and elevate it to something that has much deeper meaning, much further along in the sales process.
That's so awesome. That's one of the examples I ask people, business owners, when I'm trying to explain to them. You just mentioned commoditization and being a commodity versus not. And so I ask business owners, I'll ask typically in a setting, maybe like where we're doing a seminar or something, I'll say, if you guys imagine that you're all leaves on a tree in the middle of summer, you're all green leaves. If you really want to stand out, what color do you not want to be? You don't want to be green. And so having a customer avatar that's very well crafted, where you've actually taken the time to think, which is one of the difficult things people have trouble with, actually taking the time to crafted, where you've actually taken the time to think, which is one of the difficult things people have trouble with, actually taking the time to really seriously think about this. Having that avatar will allow you to create a very powerful and clear and compelling USP. And I actually talked about that in episode 1 in great detail. So guys, if you need to get a better idea about that, go back to episode 1 and listen to the information that Lisa and I talked about on creating a powerful USP. So why should a business owner, we talked about why they should have an avatar, but how many avatars should they actually have? And if they have different customer niches that they're serving in their business, which avatar should they build first?
So I think the short answer is, as far as how many, as many as you need to hit your target messaging. So, the goal, like you said, the goal for an avatar is to be able to take your messaging and your offers and make them personal. So if you have, 3 or 4 different or four different groups of people that require different messaging, then you need three or four different avatars to figure that out. Obviously you don't want to have so many that you're scattering your efforts. But I do think that if you know for sure that, when you speak to this person, this is the message that you're giving them, and that's going to be different than if you speak to this customer, then that's the easy answer is, how many different messages, how do you explain, when you have somebody in front of you, how many different ways do you present your material? Do you present your product or your service? So I think that's the place to start, really. And I think business owners do get overwhelmed with the idea of, oh gosh, now I have to do all of this work. But really, it usually boils down to, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 at the very most. But start off with your, two main groups and test if those different messages are working. And then if they're not, okay, which, why isn't it working, and why do I need to break it down further?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
And then I was just going to say, as far as which one to go for first, I think, I'm a fan, and I know you are too, of the Pareto principle, which is, that 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. So if you know what that small group is, that 20%, that's the place where I advise my clients to start. Let's hit that sweet spot first and then go out from there.
Yeah, it's uncanny how the Pareto principle, and actually, now that you mention that, it was chapter 1 of my book. It talks about the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, but literally, there's so many ways to look at that. 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your clients. 80% of your problems, challenges in business come from 20% of your clients. Great to work that backwards and forwards. But with respect to data, now we can talk about the Pareto principle and applying it, whether we talk about it directly or not. What is the best way to gather data? I find a lot of business owners, and I'm actually at a point in my life where I'm not taking clients right now. I've got a very small select group of people who pay me a very appreciable amount of money. I've got a great working relationship, which allows me to spend a whole lot of time with my kids and with my parents. My parents are getting old, and so I'm in a really good place in my life, and this is all by design. But having said that, what I've seen in the past, and just in talking with people in general, and then also doing research for the next book that I've been doing, I find that business owners, more often than not, will actually create in their mind the picture of their ideal person, the customer or client that they want to have. And that's not really who they're selling to. And so the data they're trying to use to create the customer avatar really is not based in the reality of their business. And so my question to you is, because I know you've got a lot of business. And so my question to you is, because I know you've got a lot of experience with this, what is in your estimation, what's really the best method for our listeners to go about gathering data so that they can build an accurate customer avatar for their business?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of business owners feel like they're pretty confident that they know who their customer is, and yet when you ask them, they find it very hard to describe that person. So what I say to them is, okay, if you think you know who your customer is, then let's start with that, and then prove it to yourself. Go out and get the data that you're going to need and see if that's true, and be objective about it. So be prepared that it may not turn out the way you want. And so, of course, there's plenty of places that you can go to get data. Again, in this digital world, we all leave a digital footprint very willingly, sometimes unknowingly. Digital footprint very willingly, sometimes unknowingly. But and so there is this treasure trove of data out there that you can use to actually, prove or disprove your thesis. So that's how I tell my clients to go about it. Here's your thesis. Your thesis is, this is who my customer is. Now we're going to go out and see if that's right. And so, a couple of things that I do is, in terms of, I start with pain points. So I ask them, what problems do you think your clients or customers are trying to solve by working with you? And they'll give me some, answers. And then there's a couple of websites that I like to go to just kind of see if that's actually true. So I'll go to Quora.com, Quora, Quora.com,
Yep.
or answerthepublic.com. and just kind of see what is the chatter is Amazon. I love going to Amazon and looking up a subject area and finding out, what books are out there, first of all. So what are the bestsellers? That kind of tells you what people are looking for. But even beyond that, if you find a great list of, bestsellers in the industry or niche that you're in, if you go to the reviews, you can really get information about what people's pain points are, because you can see, did this book help them or not? Are they still looking for information? What information did they find helpful? You can get language that they're using.
Absolutely.
I just find that Amazon is a great
So good.
resource. And,
That's so
and
good.
obviously it's free. So I think that's just a gold nugget that people overlook. You can also look at related products. I mean, there's just a whole arena of things that you can do in there.
Now, folks, I gotta be listening.
Arena of things that you can do in there.
Now, folks, I gotta tell you, really, let me interrupt you, Debbie. I'm really sorry, but let me interrupt. I just have to say this. I just can't believe you just said those things on here, because that really is like high level stuff. And I don't know that any of your competitors would be listening, but folks, I got to tell you, not many people are going to tell you without charging you that that's what you need to do. And so the fact that she actually did that, I didn't ask her to reveal those things. I'm glad she did. But the fact is, that's high level stuff, and you should definitely pay attention to what she's telling you, because I'm telling you right now, this is really good stuff that she's giving you. Go ahead, Debbie. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Another great resource, and again, it's free, is BuzzSumo.
Yep.
And that just tells you what's popular on social media. And that, again, it's a great place for you to find content about your niche or industry. You can find lead magnet ideas. That, again, it's a great place for you to find content about your niche or industry. You can find lead magnet ideas in there, and then you can also, it goes back to goals and values. You can see what people value because people share what they value. So if you're searching on BuzzSumo and you see that there's been, 1,000 shares of a particular article that's in your niche, okay, great. Why are people sharing that? Why is that important to them, and what does that tell you about what they value? So that's another, again, free, completely free. It takes a little bit of time, but I just find those Amazon and BuzzSumo, I think, are just, like I said, gold nuggets in terms of figuring out what pain points and values people have.
Those are incredible. Just one thing I want to add. If you have, as an example, in your business, if you've got a database of customers and obviously everything I'm telling you is based on the assumption that you're delivering value to your customers, clients, and patients. This is a show that contains a lot of information about marketing, and there are people who do marketing that really is about getting from people, and it doesn't deliver value. And so that actually kind of tends to leave a black eye sometimes on the whole concept of marketing. But I'm making the assumption, the mental leap, that you guys are providing value first. And so you have the best interest of your customers and clients at mind. And obviously we're in business to make a profit on purpose. But having said that, if you have an existing database, one of the smartest things you can do is to create a survey that you can send out and let your people answer some very simple questions. And there's actually, I'll put the book in the show notes. I can't think of the title of the book right now, but it's an exceptional book on how to craft surveys and how to actually send those out to your database of customers or clients. You can do quite a bit with that. The name of that book that I was just talking about is by Jennifer Havis. It's called Finding the Right Message: How to Turn the Voice of Your Customer website that essentially is going to function as a business card. But you've done a great job on websites, which I want to get to. So if I don't come back to that, trigger my brain. Remember, I was in a bad accident, so I might need you to help me with that. But what do you think, Debbie, holds people back from really investing the time to create a customer avatar for their digital marketing program? And in general, what do you think that is?
I think that people are afraid to discover that they don't know who their customer is. And of course, we're so in love with our products and services that
that's true.
Sometimes
so
we
true.
kind of build it thinking that we know who we're building it for and they will come. And so when we actually decide to dive into this, we're putting all of our assumptions at risk. I think that's really hard to do. I think that business owners don't want to find out that they've been barking up the wrong tree for however many years. And I mean, we just had that with owners don't want to find out that they've been barking up the wrong tree for however many years. And I mean, we just had that with, I just had that with a client recently where this was a home health care agency that we did some Facebook ads with, and he really believed that his audience was daughters of seniors, that were in the position of being their caretakers. And so his materials reflected that. And then when we did Facebook advertising, we quickly discovered that the people who are actually clicking through, and this, we did some content marketing around this, but the people who are actually clicking through were actually probably spouses of seniors who were needing home health care.
Yes, I think I might know who you're talking about, but maybe I don't. I mean, a lot of people, but nevertheless, don't you love Facebook? All the stuff you can do on Facebook now is incredible. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and you just get the data back, so you don't have to guess, and so now, moving forward, we know, okay, this material has to be more focused on that group rather than the daughter group. And, which is fascinating. And, we didn't know, of course, when we started that was even going to happen. But, I just think that it's hard sometimes for business owners to pivot away from their own assumptions. So, and the other thing is it takes time. And people, I think, would sometimes rather just keep plodding along and doing what they're trying to, stay on the hamster wheel instead of getting off and figuring out if they're actually on the right hamster wheel.
Okay, and so here's the next question. It's going to kind of segue into, the advantages of a small business using digital marketing to really handle a lot of the marketing heavy lifting for them. But, I first met you, the advantages of a small business using digital marketing to really handle a lot of the marketing heavy lifting for them. But, I first met you, I actually started coming to the chamber meetings, the West County chamber meetings, so that I could get research for the second book that I'm working on. The first book's, I would say, I gave you a copy. I don't know how much of it you've read, but I think it's somewhat advanced.
Yeah, I read all of it.
Okay, well, good. Thank you. I think it's somewhat advanced. But my reason for writing the book I'm working on now is first to actually understand small business owners, specifically small business owners who don't possess high-level marketing and copywriting skills. But really, it's to understand the primary challenges, fears, obstacles, and successes they're having as it relates to getting more clients for their businesses. And I'm doing that so that I can actually create a client acquisition system for them, a simpler step-by-step, hold you by the hand, if you will, framework that will actually give them the tools necessary to get clients for their businesses on demand. What I've seen from my time there is that, in my estimation, and I think you alluded to this point once, that the chamber offers, and this is another question I have, just being pragmatic, why don't they offer more in the way of helping people get more business? I don't understand that, versus just having social events. But that's just my opinion, which here's my
It's interesting that you say that, because I was actually at a meeting this morning, and we are actually putting together a business conference to do exactly that. It's going to be called Rise St. Louis, and it's going to be on September 8th over at the Emerson Auditorium at St. Luke's Hospital.
Nice.
So I'm glad you brought that up.
Can you send me what date is that on? Is that in September, you said?
September 8th.
Friday,
September 8th. It's going to be in the morning
Okay.
at Emerson Auditorium over at St. Luke's.
So what I need you to do for me also is send me the links to that, because I'll put that in the show notes as well. But or maybe not, I don't know. Or maybe just I'll send people directly to your website, because since you're the marketing person, she does a really awesome training. I guess it's once a month where she teaches business owners for social media out. Or maybe not, I don't know. Or maybe just I'll send people directly to your website, because since you're the marketing person, she does a really awesome training. I guess it's once a month where she teaches business owners for social media. But back to my point, just real quick. I've noticed that most of the business owners, and I think this is a problem that's kind of universal throughout just business in general, they go to these things and they have this desire. They want to improve their business. They want to generate more deal flow, more clients or customers, patients, whatever it may be, but they don't really know how to go about doing it. And so by going to these meetings, they're almost scratching an itch. So they feel like they've accomplished something, but they're not putting anything into action.
Right.
So that's just my perception, and really I don't think that has a whole lot to do. I know that's a challenge that we face, but really that kind of segues now into my next question. So, I'm still an advocate if I'm going to bring on a new client. I'm not averse to using direct mail. Having said that, I'll pre-qualify that by saying I do all my research on Facebook first. The vast majority on Facebook, and then I can really roll it out. Digital marketing really can do a lot of heavy lift. I'm not an advocate by saying digital marketing is the only way to go. Certainly it needs to be a huge, huge component, a huge piece of the marketing pie for a business. And so what are some of the advantages for the small business owner to really take a look at putting together a serious digital marketing program for their business? I know I do a lot with automation, but I mean, there's so much to this. Tell our listeners why this is so important.
Yeah, I think really one of the true advantages of digital marketing, and one of the reasons that I absolutely love it, is that you get all this data back almost immediately. And, maybe it's because I like to, have affirmation on what I do, that is the right thing. I get really excited when, I see conversions coming through and I see my click-through rate going through the roof and people responding and engaging with the message that I've created. I love that. I get obsessed once I start an ad on Facebook. I'm like constantly looking at it. But I think that's one of the real advantages when you have a limited budget and you have a limited amount of resources, whether a business owner is taking the time to do it themselves, or if they're hiring someone like me to do it, to come in and do it, you're still tapping into a limited amount of resources, and so you need to get the most bang for your buck. And I think that digital marketing gives you that, because you can try out messages, you can try out offers, and you get data back immediately, and so you can make that change really quickly without investing a lot of money. And I don't think that business owners truly appreciate the value of that sometimes. I think, they get overwhelmed with listings and SEO, and we were talking about, why do clients get confused about digital marketing? And I think one of the reasons is that there are so many different aspects of it that when we're talking to our clients, they sometimes think that it's conflicting advice, when really it's just spokes of a wheel. And so I think, we kind of mutually agree that it's really a disservice for us to talk about, one, without clarifying how it fits into the whole picture of a digital marketing strategy. And so it's not wrong to do SEO. It's not wrong to do, Google PPC. It's not wrong to do Facebook. It's really how you decide to put those things together and in a way that best fits your business. So I think the beauty of it is the data and being able to get that. And the other thing that I tell my clients is, even if we fail, if we have a campaign that gets, very little engagement, very little response, really we haven't failed at all, because that's just something that we can check off the list. Like, okay, we know that something in there didn't work. It's either the messaging, the offer, or the audience that's wrong. And so how do we adjust now? And that's now off the table. We can check that off and move forward. So I think that's really the advantage.
Okay, so that actually just triggered a thought, Debbie, that I'd like to share. As I mentioned before, I've been to several of your training events, and it never seems to fail that someone in attendance, like a business owner, will typically, in response to you asking, if anyone has a question about the content that you just covered, someone will invariably attempt to make their case as to why what you're teaching, won't work for them. Now, I think you've known me long enough to agree that, I'm somewhat of an opinionated person, not in a crass way, but when it comes to wasting time or a complaining, or someone who just wants to put the kibosh on anything that you're saying, I feel the need to set things right. So for all the folks who like to complain, it doesn't matter really who you are. I have a question for you. Here it is. Instead of wasting your time complaining, about your situation, or complaining about why this strategy or that particular system won't work for your business, because, your business is different, like your business is the only one of its kind on the planet, no less. Why don't you just save your time and buy the new client traffic you want from Facebook? It's pretty simple. Why don't you just hire Debbie and stop? Right now you guys are doing one of two things. You're either trying to get clients by paying with your time, like coming to these things like this to network, or you could just pay Debbie and save your time and work on maybe improving your sales process. So when she delivers really good quality people to you, you can actually have a better, more effective sales presentation, or maybe work on customer. I'm like, well, can actually have a better, more effective sales presentation, or maybe work on customer retention or customer referrals. So you're either paying for new clients right now with your time by trying to go into network events or cold calling people or however you're doing it, or you could just pay Debbie to do it. Which to me, you've seen me, I get kind of frustrated. I'm like, why don't you just pay her? I mean, you could save so much time and money by just having her do it. So, there are a lot of moving parts.
I think that's the the curse of the solopreneur or the small business owner that wears so many hats. We get so used to wearing so many hats that we don't step back and really evaluate how much is my time worth. Am I doing $100 work, $1,000 work, $10,000 an hour work, or am I doing $10 an hour work? And when we get stuck in that doing $10 an hour work, it's easier work to do. It gives us a false sense of accomplishment, and the wrong things in your business. So, and I know I've been through that myself in my own business. When you're doing everything, it is hard to take a step back and say, you know what, this isn't worth my time. I'm going to spend 50 hours trying to figure this out, and my time, is worth $500 an hour. So I'm going to waste $2,500. If I pay somebody else to do it, I'm going to be on the plus side. Most business owners don't think that way.
Who's helped me?
In terms of dollars.
Who's helped me more than anything with that? And I mean, I have to give credit where credit is due. In fact, pretty much everything I know about marketing, almost all of it, I've learned by paying people and studying other people. And obviously, you learn things as you go. You pay attention. You look at data. If you make a mistake, which I've made plenty of mistakes, you're like, I don't want to do that again. But I've learned so much from Dan Sullivan in the Strategic Coach program. So it's a very exclusive coaching program. It's $25,000 a year, and then also in the Genius Network, which is another awesome program. That also is $25,000 a year. But Joe Polish is actually the founder of Genius Network, and Joe's got a really interesting story. I actually met Joe for the first time. I think it was back in October of 2009 at a John Carlton copywriting seminar. And Joe got his start in marketing when he was, as he likes to tell the story, a dead broke carpet cleaner living off credit cards. Kind of his mantra. And today, Joe's actually built two companies, Piranha Marketing, which started off as a coaching and consulting company strictly for carpet cleaners, and it was to teach them how to market and grow their businesses. And a few years back, Joe started Genius Network with Dan Sullivan, and that's really a coaching program where I feel like the smartest, most successful business owners and entrepreneurs in the world. They meet 4 times a year in a high-level mastermind setting, and I have to admit that's one instance where I definitely feel like the dumbest guy in the room, which, as far as I'm concerned, that's awesome. When you're the dumbest person in the room, it means you're going to learn a lot. But yeah, both of Joe's businesses benefited. When you're the dumbest person in the room, it means you're going to learn a lot. But yeah, both of Joe's businesses generate over $25 million a year, which is what great marketing and copywriting can do for your business. So, I got to give credit where credit is due, and there's no doubt that I've really benefited personally. I think my clients have benefited from it as well, but I've benefited greatly from Joe's Genius Network Mastermind program and also Dan's Strategic Coach program as well. But back to my original point, when Joe started his carpet cleaning company, he did so for the sole purpose of creating a job for himself. And, one of the things I noticed in working with a lot of healthcare professionals over the years is that they just want a job. And so they don't want to deal with a lot of these things. They want to hand it off to somebody else. So that just reaffirms the fact that it's really a good idea for people, you guys who are listening, if you're not super slick at marketing and you want to grow your business, I think Debbie is a really viable, solid, legitimate solution. Legitimate solution. I don't know if she can help you because, quite frankly, I don't know your business, and Debbie, I think, would say that as well. But I know one thing: she's definitely worth looking into and checking her out. So, Debbie, earlier I talked about websites. Websites, I'll tell you, people just don't. When I say people, business owners, especially healthcare professionals, they just don't understand. It's not a business card. It's the portal of entry into a relationship with you. And I know you do really great work with websites. So if you could take a couple minutes, like 2 or 3 minutes, and just talk about, have free reign with that question.
Yeah, so when I started Silver Tablet Marketing, my intention really wasn't to do website design. I really wanted to focus more on digital sales funnels, and I quickly discovered that it was useless to send traffic to crummy websites. And a lot of people that, for example, on Facebook, you have to know how to work behind the scenes and install the Facebook pixel and where that needs to go so that you can get the right ad objective and get the right metrics and all of that. So, I again talking about pivoting, which has kind of been a little bit of a theme in this conversation, I pivoted and said, okay, if I'm going to build a digital sales funnel for you, then I also need the capability to build something that when people visit, they're going to convert. And so, I develop a design WordPress websites. I work solely in WordPress, and that's a choice that I made intentionally because I wanted to really become an expert in one thing, and that's what I decided I was going to focus on. And it's a very user-friendly system, and very easy for clients to get in. Again, system, and very easy for clients to get in. After it's all said and done, and make small changes, that aren't going to blow up the site. So,
yeah, I love WordPress.
So I basically took off in that direction, and within, I had clients for website design very early on in the company's founding, and just again, working through that customer avatar and trying to figure out, okay, what are the paths that people need to take to get the information that they need to get in order to make a sale. And so that's where I like to spend my time, is really figuring out, okay, who's the avatar and what steps do they need to take? What's their first step? What's their second step? What's their third step? Hopefully after that, you're pretty close to a sale, but and that's what I've been working with on my clients. So, and it just, dovetails with the digital marketing strategies.
Okay, so you gave me that awesome customer journey map, and I am going to put a link. You're going to send me a link so people can actually access that on your website. What about someone who, say, is listening right now, and number one, they definitely need more new clients. I'm not sure, do you work with people pretty much locally, like in St. Louis, Missouri, Illinois area, or do you work with people all over the country? And if whatever that answer is, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? How can they contact you to know more?
I do have a lot of clients right here in St. Louis, but because it's, a digital world, it's not that I don't need to be physically with somebody in order to have them as a client. So I welcome people from any part of the country that wants to work with me. The best way for them to reach me is really through email, and they can either go through the contact form on my website, or they can just email me directly at debbie@silvertabletmarketing.com.
I'm assuming that your website, the form on your website, the website you're speaking about is silvertabletmarketing.com?
That's correct.
And then what's the specific page? Because believe it or not, some people will not be able to find it, even though it's right there on the page at the top. What's the...
There's a button right at the top in the menu. There's a contact button.
Perfect. So silvertabletmarketing.com/contact, or just look at the top of the homepage, or you can email Debbie at debbie@silvertabletmarketing.com. Deb, anything else you want to add before we go?
There is one thing that I would like to say, and I think this is something that gets missed a lot when people talk about customer avatars, and that is another step that our clients.
Great, that's awesome.
Our clients really need to understand what is the truth about their industry. So what's already being said about their industry? What are people generally positive about their industry? Are they leery about their industry? What do people know about their specific, solution? I think is really important to understand as well. And then, again, understanding what is behind their business in terms of values. Because when you are able to, when your product or service aligns with your customer's worldview, they buy from you because it reinforces what they already value. and it provides an opportunity for them to live those values and attitudes in front of other people. So when they understand that your worldview views are compatible, you don't have to persuade them. And I think that's really in front of other people. So when they understand that your worldview views are compatible, you don't have to persuade them. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle that a lot of people overlook. You know, people these days are very connected to products that have a deeper meaning. So, you know, if you think about like Tom's Shoes, for example,
Yep.
but it could even be something like a business that they know is helping. You know, right now we're in a flood situation here in St. Louis, so if I know that there's a business that's doing some, you know, outreach and volunteer work helping people that are affected by the flood, I'm more likely to do business with them because I'm an altruistic person and that appeals to me.
Right.
So I think businesses really have to look inward, you know, as well as looking out towards their customer. I think they really need to look inward at themselves and figure out what drives them, what are their way to tell that story so that people know what's behind the product or service that they're offering. And they can then make those connections with people that are similar to them.
That's another incredible point you brought up. And just one thing I'll add to that, by knowing your values and really seeding that into your customer avatar process so you know really who it is that you want to serve and who you are serving, that's going to go a long way to really help prevent that 20% of the people that cause 80% of your problems from entering even into a relationship with you. You know, the worst advice in the world
Absolutely.
is bad advice, even if it's, you know, the most costly, most expensive advice in the world is bad advice. And one of the most expensive, costly, damaging things to a business is to hire the wrong person to work in your company, and it's to have the wrong clients or customers or patients in your business. They are the death knell to a business. So, Debbie, you know what? This has been an awesome interview. You really did come through for me today, and you came through more importantly for the listeners. I'm so proud of the call today. I really am. You did a great job. I cannot thank you enough, and I have to tell people, you guys, I don't even have to tell people. You don't have to take my word for it. You've listened to her long enough. She really knows what she's doing. And I will say this, coming to the training she does, I've met a lot of her customers and I've heard nothing but rave reviews about Debbie. I look forward to working with you in the future.